2012. To give you a background on this, pursuant to ARS 15-904, the district shall prepare and furnish to the superintendent of public instruction an annual financial report containing budgeted and actual expenditures for the preceding year. The Auditor General, in conjunction with the Department of Education, prescribes the format of the annual financial reports. The fiscal year 2011-2012 annual financial report presents the financial activity of the district for that time period. Following governing board approval, a link must be posted on the district website to the annual financial report by November 15th. Mr. Roman?
Before I get started, before I forget, I should say that the AFR is included in your materials. The very last page of that is food service information, all the meal counts, revenues by source, that kind of stuff is in there. So you had some interest in those figures. Those are in there for you. Expenditures by function. Classroom instruction, that's 58.5%, is down a little bit, and the main reason for that is that EduJobs monies that we had picked up some of our classroom teacher expense this year.
Scott, Mr. Walmer, is that consistent with what the Auditor General, how they calculate classroom expenditures versus non-classroom?
No, this is M&O and Prop 301 monies only. So when the state does that calculation, the Auditor General does that calculation, it's most of our funds. There's no debt service in there, but there's no community ed in there, but most everything else is included. I don't think they include capital outlay. Student support, that's everybody who works with students, nurses, psychologists, speech professionals. Instructional support is the support of teachers. That would be your curriculum department, your special ed department, etc. General administration, the governing board, the administrative office. School administration, that's the principal's office, principal, assistant principal, and the office manager. Central services is business, technology, and human resources. Fiscal plant is building maintenance, Roy's department. Transportation, and most of the other is a required federal match for the food services program. Regular education, special education, and transportation are the three segments of the M&O budget, and this remains fairly steady.
Scott, when you think about our M&O budget, say 4 years ago, how does it compare to the 33 million that we show now at the end of 2009?
It's down significantly, and most of the reason for that is student attrition. The actual state cuts hit us more in the capital outlay funds, soft capital and restricted capital. Their Prop 301 included a requirement that the state funds the district to the extent of 2% or inflation, whichever is less. They've not done that, so M&O has been, the per student amount has remained identical for several years. 89% salary and benefits, that's similar to the year before. Benefits themselves are up a little bit, 19.8 to 21.3. This is a bit of an area of concern as healthcare continues to rise. So, healthcare has risen 10 or so % each year, and if you were to chart that out for a 10 or a 15-year period, it's utterly unsustainable. So that has to be watched.
And You know, there was, due to a provision in healthcare reform, insurers, anyone who's not self-insured, the plans had to spend at least 80 or 85%, depending on the type of plan, on basically healthcare, and anything that fell short of that they had to refund. So are you aware of the district getting a refund, and that's something that I assume would show into next year?
I'm aware of that. We got a check for $90,000. And I just calced out how much everybody paid in. The district, of course, paid the lion's share because we pay for everyone's individual policy. So anyone who bought up and bought insurance for family members and those on COBRA were entitled to a small share of that. So of that $90,000, $80,000 was applied to reduce last year's health insurance costs, and the remainder went to reduce individual policy costs currently.
So our total expenditures, that 80,000 would be about 1%, a little over 1% of our total expenditures at this point. Well, in terms of our overall benefits, but not just of our health insurance, I suppose our health insurance costs.
Yeah, also in there is the retirement, which went up also.
So that was actually a pretty sizable, to get a $90,000 check was not insignificant.
It was not insignificant, and it was surprising. I mean, it's the first year of a law, so who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, probably.
I would imagine they'll come into balance somehow.
They'll just, not raise their rates as much.
Because it's pointless.
You won't get the check.
Yeah. Classroom site fund revenues have been in decline for several years. They're now increasing a little bit. Those funds carry a no supplant clause, so that increased money would have to either be spent on pay increases or monies to new teachers who are hired. Capital outlay funds, here's what we spent. Unrestricted capital, soft capital, all we buy from those funds are consumable workbooks that go with our adopted curriculum. So unrestricted capital funds, in theory, funds curriculum, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, building improvements, and technology.
And I'm sorry, which funds that, the soft capital?
Unrestricted capital. Soft capitals is unrestricted capital that has to be used in the classroom. Yes, really say that. We did have some adjacent ways that almost all of that went to the new Papago, getting that hooked up to the outside world. So you won't see that in the coming years. There's maybe $30,000 left in that fund. And bond proceeds is also spent entirely on capital purposes. Bonds outstanding, we made a payment on July 1st, and so we have $15.4 million remaining. Those dates are the same. The 18950 should be 2011. Here's a sort of diagram, well, it is a diagram of our repayment process. We've made 2 payments, and that's where we are in the scheme of things. Those 2 payments at the very bottom, those are the Build America bonds. They have a different repayment schedule, and the idea was for our second issue to go in that gap there for repayment, and the tax rate would remain stable throughout. So we'll see what happens there. I guess you can barely see it from where I'm standing, but those top 2 principal payments have little lines too. Federal grants and state grants. The state grant now is down to the school safety grant, which provides resource officers at some of our schools. 11.7 million in federal, that's actually up $900,000, but that certainly will decline. This last year was the last of the ARRA money, and also the new census figures will come online, and a lot of the western districts have grown very rapidly, and those figures get used for the next 10 years, so they'll get a bigger share from now on, and we can expect those figures to drop a little Other expenditures, this will give you an idea of how much we spend from some of the ancillary funds, gifts and donations and tax credit monies. Indirect costs are funds that the district gets to keep from the state and federal grants for the purpose of serving those grants with sort of business services and human resources services, things like that. For example, we run payroll for the employees that are hired for the grants, so we get some of that money to do that with. Instructional improvement is Indian gaming monies, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the budget update. Civic Center is monies we get for renting our facilities, so there's a couple of preschools. There's a lion's share of those revenues, and of course food services. School plant is from the sale of district assets. That comes in very small amounts as we sell obsolete equipment, and when it gets high enough, we traditionally have used that to buy school buses with. Also the cell tower money is in there. Expenditures per student, I always show you this just to get an idea of what level of funding comes with all of those. It's not really comparable year to year because it's impacted by swings in student count. Since we're funded a year after the student count, if student loss decelerates, it greatly impacts this. And someone might mistakenly think it shows more of what the state has done, but it really doesn't. It's more impacted by swings in student count. So it does give you an idea of what we provide to students from maintenance and operations and some of the other funds and how important they are in the scheme of things. Questions on that? That concludes this presentation.
The next agenda item is business involvement.